All right, guys, we're wrapping up Unit 5, and we have some odds and ends of standards. So I'm going to try to go through some quickly, only because even though we haven't uh, addressed it directly, we have talked about some of these things before. So for Standard 16, assess the causes of revolution in the 20th century, such as the Russian, Chinese, Indian, and Cuban Revolution, and determine the impact on global politics. So we already addressed the Russian Revolution, and we have mentioned the one in India quite a bit. So focus on things that we haven't really talked about. Okay, these are not like the revolutions we've already learned about, the revolutions in Haiti or France or America, because these were not based on Enlightenment ideals like they were. However, they were based on ideas like socialism and communism. They were geared less to the middle class and more to the peasants and the proletariat. Many of these were also very violent revolutions. Okay, we discussed the Russian Revolution, so no need to get into too much detail here. Know that it was a lot about workers' rights. It was about communism. You see an image of Lenin right there. We learned how they left World War I because of this revolution. Okay. Now the revolution in China, which we touched about a little bit, but here's a little bit more detail. Okay, in 1949, it happens. We have Mao Zedong, who is here, versus Chiang Kai-shek. This was also a communist revolution, and they did so because of communist ideology. The peasants revolted, and for land reform. Some of the effects, um, you had a dictatorship, the nationalists were defeated, social equality of classes, and now you began to have collective farms in China as well. Okay, moving on to the Cuban Revolution, which was in 1959, led by Fidel Castro. I'm sure you've heard of him already. This was also a communist revolution, and the reason was a lot of resentment over the dictatorship of Batista. This is Batista right here. Here's some of the effects. It led to a very harsh dictatorship under the Castro regime. It did have effects on literacy, healthcare, and the press was limited. The economy was improved temporarily, but not long term. So some of these ideas we're going to come back to when we get to the Cold War, which is why I just wanted to touch upon it. We're not going to go into much detail with this, but hopefully this gives you some background as we get to the Cold War. All right, so let's move on to another standard real quick, and that's Standard 21. Assess the extent to which World War, depression, nationalist ideology, communism, and liberal democratic ideas contributed to the emergence of movements for national self-rule or sovereignty in Africa and Asia. And to be honest, I took all these notes on it. I was going to make a big slide presentation. I changed it to about 3 slides because there's a lot of ideas here that are a little bit too complex. Not that you want to understand them, but it will get us into different tangents than what we've been covering for Unit 5. So I'm actually going to come back to some of this when we do the Cold War, but let me just give you a really quick background on what I was going to start to cover. What you want to know is that the many empires dismantled after World War II. I mean, some of them we learned about dismantled after World War One, but now a lot of imperialist empires dismantled after World War II. There was international factors why, but there's also domestic reasons why, which is worth mentioning. Okay, as you have more expat is a term like for expatriates, so someone that left a country, um, and you just have changing demographics within the country. For example, think of India. Think of someone like Gandhi, who actually left India to be educated in England and coming back, and with that education, being empowered to lead independence movements. So the demographic was changing as you had these educated nationalist leaders leading nationalist movements. Um, as a result, for a few decades. Some of these countries did struggle to industrialize, right? Which is why we learned when we did the Industrial Revolution that some countries are just industrializing now, right? Some of their economies suffered. Uh, Developing countries had trouble buying manufactured goods, and this is Argentina during its depression. And here's just some figures. I did want to include this just so you see the difference. By the end of World War II in 1945, half of the world's population lived under colonial rule. Right? That's a huge percentage. Think of that. Right? Half of all people in the world were colonial, right? Under the rule of a foreign nation. Fast forward to 1970, it's less than 2 million people, and they were mostly small island nations. I would like to find out that figure now, so remind me, and I'll try to find it before next class. Okay, so there's one more standard I want to cover, and the arts, but I'm going to make that separate. Um, I think you'll like that one. And just answer some questions. And if you do have questions on this, please let me know.